Bom, boa noite a todos.
Boa noite.
Se eu não errei as contas, hoje nós estamos na metade, né, dessa nossa jornada e talvez no filme mais, né, relevante ou mais importante, né, dos filmes que nós vamos assistir ao longo desse curso. Se eu tivesse que passar um único filme sobre Hitchcock, certamente seria esse. Não é o meu preferido. E, de certa forma, também não sei se seria o preferido da crítica até, porque o Vértigo, né, um corpo que cai, hoje, já em algumas revistas especializadas, até já ultrapassou o Cidadão Kane, que não é pouca coisa, na preferência, né, no que se refere ao filme, o melhor filme de todos os tempos, embora essas listas sejam sempre discutíveis. Mas só o fato de estar citado, dependendo se primeiro, segundo, terceiro, ou qualquer outra produção, já, de certa forma, demonstra né, a relevância, né, da obra do Hitchcock. Né? E esse filme em especial, porque eu acho que ele é marcante dessa sofisticação, né, do Hitchcock. Então, hoje nós vamos ver Janela, Indiscreta, que eu acho que é um filme que vai... Né, é um filme meio longo, né? Então hoje nós temos, é um filme que tem quase 2 horas, e o documentário associado a ele, né, também é longo, 55 minutos, então eu vou tentar hoje ser meio rápido, embora seja um filme que talvez demande uma maior quantidade de discussão, mas eu vou talvez falar mais hoje, né, no decorrer da exibição. Porque, né, o documentário é muito legal e o filme é longo, então não daria para a gente esticar muito isso. Então o filme tem quase 2 horas, né, 114, 115 minutos, e o documentário tem 55 minutos. Né, os outros têm 35 minutos em média, eu acho que esse é um pouquinho maior. E Janela, Indiscreta, quer dizer, eu acho que é um filme que demonstra o grau de sofisticação que o Hitchcock chegou, talvez seja o primeiro dos grandes filmes da carreira dele. É um filme que faz parte da lista de filmes que compõem os chamados filmes perdidos do Hitchcock, porque ele separou alguns filmes como legado ou como herança para a filha dele, que eram filmes que ele tinha controle, então eram filmes que ele segurava para não serem exibidos, né? Para, de certa forma, no futuro, né, quando esses filmes fossem reexibidos, a filha poder receber alguma coisa né, pela exibição. Então, nós já vimos um deles, né, o Hope, né, o Festim Diabólico, é um dos filmes desse legado, e esse também, o Janela Indiscreta, é outro dos filmes. Então é um filme que, de certa forma, ele sabia, né, é como você ter um objeto muito valioso e você sabe que, com o tempo, ele só vai valorizar. Né? O elenco principal é o James Stewart, que é um ator marcante dentro da carreira do Hitchcock. É um dos papéis, né, mais importantes dele, quer dizer, e ele também está no Vértigo, no corpo que cai, né? Então ele é, né, um dos principais atores, né, do Hitchcock. De certa forma, em geral, ele como figura, né, como ícone, na carreira dele sempre esteve associado à ideia do típico americano, no pior e no melhor concepção do termo, quer dizer, um sujeito tanto quanto popular, não muito ligado a questões mais, né, de uma cultura mais europeia, mas uma pessoa extremamente correta, uma pessoa extremamente criativa, né, esforçada, inteligente, né, sem ter, de certa forma, um pouco desse verniz europeu, que normalmente os filmes americanos é sempre colocado como uma coisa meio frágil, você olha os filmes dos filmes no ar, normalmente os caras, né, as pessoas que tinham um lado mais europeu tinham uma coisa meio feminina, né, tinha um certo lado de afetação, né, e não é o caso da figura de James Stewart, não só nos filmes que ele fez com Hitchcock, mas nos filmes que ele fez, né, com outros diretores. Normalmente ele parece encarnar o melhor da sociedade americana. E é a primeira parceria com a Grace Kelly, que foi um furacão, né? A Grace Kelly fez, acho que 11 filmes. Fez 11 filmes, e desses 11, 3 foram com o Hitchcock. Quer dizer, então ela é uma das mais marcantes mulheres, né, do Hitchcock. Quer dizer, essas loiras quase etéreas, quase divinais, e que, né, de certa forma, vão caracterizar a produção dele subsequente. Quer dizer, ela vai trabalhar no próximo filme que nós vamos ver, né, Diz que ele para matar, e depois vai fazer O Ladrão de Casaca, que esse a gente não vai exibir, que é com Cary Grant. E O Ladrão de Casaca é o filme onde ela conhece que é filmado em Monte Carlo, não é? Onde que era aquele? Mônaco. Ela vai conhecer o príncipe de Mônaco e vai acabar casando e ficando por lá, né? Então, não é Mônaco?
Monte Carlo é Mônaco.
Monte Carlo, então a minha geografia não estava tão errada. E tem a Thelma Ritter, que vai fazer o alívio cômico, que é genial, né? De certa forma, uma personagem que nós já vimos em vários filmes, eu vou comentar um pouco mais na frente. E existia, vou comentar depois isso. Tá, o roteiro, né, que é baseado na história, que por sua vez também está relacionado a alguns casos verídicos de assassinos, que também, de certa forma, influenciaram a confecção desse filme. Temas. Então, basicamente, os temas fortes desse filme, o evidente voyeurismo, que hoje é algo, de certa forma, muito comum da nossa sociedade. Quer dizer, nós somos uma sociedade, sempre fomos, talvez, uma sociedade voyeurística, mas agora o acesso a esses desejos são muito mais fáceis de serem acessados e com uma intensidade muito maior. Então é um filme que explora muito isso e, em função disso, é muito analisado como uma grande metáfora do processo cinematográfico, do fazer cinema. É um filme que fala muito de como se fazer cinema, né? Nós vamos ver que a posição do James Stewart, corresponde, de certa forma, à posição do espectador, né? Nós vamos discutir um pouco, né, isso mais para frente. E também tem a questão do casamento, que é um outro tema que está sempre constante, né, na biografia do Hitchcock. Então são alguns dos temas principais que o filme trabalha. É lógico que no primeiro momento aquilo que a gente vê é a questão do assassinato. Existe um assassinato lá que tem que ser elaborado, tem que ser descoberto, tem que ser entendido, tem que ser solucionado, né? Mas isso é a história mais visível, aquela que salta, né, aos olhos no primeiro momento. Mas existem essas outras coisas que estão lá, presentes no desenvolvimento, né, de toda a trama. Um detalhe da equipe fotográfica, de novo, né, o Robert Burks, que nós vimos presente nos filmes anteriores. Quer dizer, ele já, nos 3 últimos filmes, né, o Robert Burks trabalha como fotógrafo. Então é o início de uma carreira extremamente interessante, né, prestigiada, associada ao Hitchcock. E é um filme que ele fez em Technicolor, quer dizer, que é um processo fotográfico e que, se a gente olhar no decorrer da carreira, quer dizer, o Hitchcock era um sujeito que sempre antenado com essas novidades tecnológicas, mas em relação à cor, ele nem sempre trabalhou diretamente com a cor, porque vira e mexe mais para frente, quando ele achava que era melhor para a trama, ele trabalhava com preto e branco. Então aqui tem um Technicolor e um dado interessante é que durante algum tempo, pela má conservação dos negativos do filme, pensava-se, existia a possibilidade do filme ter sido irreversivelmente comprometido num dos canais de cor, perder todo o amarelo. E quando a gente fala perder todo o amarelo, não significa que some a cor, um objeto que tem a cor amarela desaparece, não. Você tira o amarelo de todas as cores que compõem o filme, e isso vai afetar toda a cor do filme. E, por sorte, depois que o filme foi restaurado, isso conseguiu ser revertido, mas durante um certo tempo era uma preocupação que a gente nunca ia conseguir ver o filme da maneira como ele foi concebido. Então, aqui um pouquinho das imagens, do set de filmagem, que é um grande detalhe, nós vamos trabalhar, falar muito dessa questão do set de filmagem. Outros detalhes, outros destaques aqui, a Edith Head, que trabalha com os figurinos, que também é uma das maiores figurinistas de todos os tempos, e vai ter uma longa carreira trabalhando com o Hitchcock e também com uma série de outros grandes diretores. Se vocês assistirem aquele desenho, Os Incríveis, aquela mulher que faz, uma baixinha de óculos grandes, é uma homenagem a Edith Head. Como é que é o nome dela?
Edna Monroe.
Edna, é Edith Head. É homenagem a Edith Head. E eu acho que eu acho que é ela, que eu não tenho certeza, eu acho que é essa que é Edith Head. E eles tiveram uma enorme preocupação na questão do vestuário da Grace Kelly.
Você sabia que esse filme é um ícone da moda?
Sim, eu acho que tem eu não confesso que eu não entendo tanto, mas eu sei que sim, que tem a Camille Parker escreve muito a respeito da roupa dos filmes do Hitchcock, mas esse filme em particular...
Quem determina a moda é Paris. De vez em quando, que nem hoje eles estão calculando o que vai ser moda daqui 3 anos. É Paris. E toda vez que a moda, eles decidem que a moda será anos 50, esse filme é tido como um exemplo.
E eu acho que
é totalmente anos 50 e é Dior. Totalmente Dior.
Eu acho que uma coisa, ampliando aquilo que você falou, acho que se a gente quer ter uma noção do que significa a moda, uma maneira da indústria da moda, a Glenn Close no Diabo Veste Prada, que tem um discurso a respeito da indústria da moda, dá a real dimensão disto, e no caso das roupas que a Grace Kelly, e tem muito a ver com o personagem dela, que nós vamos discutir, tem uma importância fundamental, quer dizer, e hoje a gente vê isso de modo análogo com o vestuário que as novelas da Globo trazem, quer dizer, as novelas, os personagens da novela da Globo ditam a moda em todo o país, quer dizer, então nós temos, isso não é uma indústria pequena, desprezível, Então a Edith Head tem uma enorme importância nisso. E o Hitchcock sabia reconhecer essa questão da roupa apropriada para o personagem. E o Tommasini, que é um editor que vai editar a partir daqui, todos os grandes filmes do Hitchcock. Ele vai ser um outro parceiro constante na carreira do Hitchcock. A música, do Franz Waxman, mas aí ele já colaborou em outros filmes anteriores, não é ainda o grande parceiro do Hitchcock. Nós já vimos ele com o Dimitri ontem, mas não, ainda não é o Bernard Herrmann, né? E mesmo no caso desse filme, é algo para vocês prestarem atenção. Por quê? Não tem trilha sonora quase esse filme. Se vocês prestarem atenção, toca uma música do Franz Waxman logo no início do filme, na parte inicial do filme. Depois, o resto da trilha sonora é totalmente diegética. O que eu quero dizer com diegético? Quer dizer, existe uma música diegética e uma música não diegética. A música diegética é aquela música que pertence à narrativa, que todos estão escutando. Então, quando alguém toca o piano e todos os personagens escutam, é uma música diegética. Quando alguém liga um rádio, é uma música diegética. Nós estamos escutando aquilo que os personagens escutam, né? E aqui, a maior parte do filme, a música a sonoridade tem muito a ver com a sonoridade daquele local, daquele espaço em que se desenrola a trama. O que, de certa forma, antecipa uma experiência posterior que ele vai fazer, no caso dos Pássaros, em que não existe uma trilha sonora um caráter mais imitado, mas os efeitos sonoros dos pássaros, de certa forma, uma das primeiras trilhas sonoras digitais, né, é o que é usado. Quer dizer, ele abdica, de repente, da música, né, de uma música que cria um clima. Quando você escuta a música, normalmente, aí, é porque alguém está tocando piano ou um rádio está ligado. Então, que é uma coisa interessante, que é uma coisa, um filme que trabalha com suspense, algo extremamente corajoso, né, ou inovador. E aí a questão do espaço, que eu acho que esse é outra coisa extremamente interessante. Aqui nós juntamos, né, uma foto que está, né, juntou todo o espaço, que isso é tudo construído, é estúdio. Nós vimos, né, nos filmes anteriores, por exemplo, no Festim de Agora, do Hope, um trabalho, né, do Hitchcock, no sentido de criar um fundo daquela janela, daquela sala onde passa a trama, e que mostrasse a evolução temporal. Aqui ele faz também, quer dizer, o filme tem pelo menos 4 sets de luzes para indicar o amanhecer, a tarde, manhã e noite, que a gente pode ver aqui, né, no fundo. E esses apartamentos, né, todo esse cenário foi criado dentro do estúdio. Eles tiveram até que rebaixar o estúdio, porque, né, eram tão grandes as proporções que eles tiveram que fazer um buraco no estúdio. Então o apartamento que nós vamos conseguir chegar, né, isso, né, todos os eventos, ele está construído no nível do chão, e os demais que estão abaixo do nível do apartamento do Jeffrey, do repórter, foram cavados, né? Então isso daqui é tudo, tudo um espaço que foi construído, é um cenário. E era um cenário que tinha luzes, que tinha eletricidade, que tinha água encanada. Então, alguns desses apartamentos são fakes, né? Só tem janela, mas outros apartamentos eram mobiliados, e você podia até morar. Quer dizer, a senhora Torso, eu vou comentar um desses personagens que mora aqui, durante, né, segundo consta, durante a feitura do filme, ela ficou morando, né, nessa casinha aqui. Então, então, note que é todo um espaço construído, né, projetado. Então tem plantas, quer dizer, é algo extremamente sofisticado. Quer dizer, que você está vendo muita informação junto, é meio difícil, mas é só para dar uma ideia, né, do grau de sofisticação, de detalhamento envolvido nesse projeto. Aqui uma visão 3D, né, desse cenário. De novo, né, a gente vai detalhar algumas dessas janelas, desses personagens, e o cenário do mocinho, do Jeffries, em que ele observa a vizinhança. No primeiro momento, nós somos apresentados a esse universo. Ele faz, de certa forma, ele cria um pequeno microcosmos, e que ele tem total controle, porque naquele ambiente ele selecionou quais eram as pessoas que ele gostaria de representar, de pertencer nesse pequeno universo, e de certa forma ele indica, dá alguns detalhes. No primeiro momento, quando ele passeia por esse pátio, nós somos apresentados a figura do mocinho, e já dá uma ideia de que existe um calor infernal naquele momento. Quer dizer, então ele é um sujeito que vai estar acometido, que vai estar preso a uma cadeira de rodas, porque sofreu um acidente, e com esse calor infernal ele não tem muito o que fazer, a não ser ficar bisbilhotando a vida alheia. E aí nós temos as janelas, que são telas de cinema. Então, de certa forma, o nosso herói simbolicamente, pode ser associado à figura do espectador, a nós, quando estamos no cinema. Nós estamos imóveis no cinema, olhando vidas serem construídas, destruídas, expostas ali na nossa frente. Então, uma série de personagens são trabalhados. Existe um casal mais idoso, que dorme do lado de fora porque está muito calor. Tem um detalhe interessante nesse casal, um truque de direção, que num determinado momento, quando eles levantam de manhã, então eles vão ter que recolher a cama, o colchão, e o Hitchcock, para conseguir um desempenho perfeito desses dois atores, ele falou o seguinte, ele falou para o homem, puxa para a esquerda, para a mulher falou, puxa para a direita, e não comentou. Aí o que aconteceu? Na hora que eles vão fazer essa sequência, naturalmente eles puxaram para o lado errado e eles não conseguiam entrar em acordo. Isso, presta atenção nesse momento, quando isso ocorrer, nós vamos ter logo de frente uma bailarina, essa senhora Torso, que ele vai acompanhando, e ele, meu Hitchcock, instruiu com essa bailarina que ela não deveria tomar aulas para ficar, para dançar melhor. Quer dizer, ele queria que ela mantivesse um certo amadorismo, então é o voyeurismo mais sexual ali ligado, a figura da mulher seminua dançando na frente dele, mas ele começa a se interessar por outros casos. Existem recém-casados, existe um músico, existe o pátio e nessa janela inferior tem uma mulher solitária, uma solteirona, que em determinado momento vai ser importante para a evolução da trama, porque surge uma questão moral a ser colocada, quer dizer, você está observando as pessoas, quer dizer, invadindo a privacidade alheia, e de repente você se depara com uma pessoa num momento extremamente depressivo, que está prestes a se matar, quer dizer, cometer suicídio. Como é que você procede? Quer dizer, você interfere, você mostra que você estava invadindo a intimidade. Então o filme coloca algumas questões a respeito do voyeurismo que são extremamente interessantes. Tem um corredor que, de certa forma, é uma janela para o exterior. Nós conseguimos ver um pouco do que ocorre fora do prédio através de um pequeno corredor aqui. E numa das janelas nós temos um casal em que existe a suspeita de que esse marido matou a mulher. E é sobre isto, né, que o filme vai, né, digamos assim, o arco dramático mais evidente vai ser trabalhado. Quando você apresenta em definitivo o personagem, é uma construção extremamente primorosa. Quer dizer, o Hitchcock conta uma história, uma longa história, de uma maneira extremamente sintética. Ele diz, num único plano, quem é o nosso personagem principal. Né? Então ele começa do rosto, sem cortes, vai descendo, mostra a perna dele, o nome dele está escrito ali, então a gente já sabe qual é o nome do personagem, já sabe que ele está preso numa cadeira de rodas, porque ele está com a perna engessada, a câmera se desloca, nós vemos uma câmera quebrada. Ora, a profissão dele é fotógrafo, e uma câmera quebrada, porque ele é um fotógrafo que se aventura, quer dizer que é um fotógrafo que trabalha em eventos mais perigosos. E a câmera sobe, você vê fotos, né, daquilo com que ele trabalha, né, que reforça essa ideia de periculosidade, do que ele, né, vive no limiar. E depois nós temos uma imagem um pouco estranha, quer dizer, uma mulher em negativo e uma capa de revista. Que nós já apresentamos a mulher e a questão do casamento, né, que é o outro arco dramático colocado aqui. Quer dizer, e um arco dramático bem interessante, bom, eu vou comentar um pouco mais para frente. O Hitchcock vai aparecer brevemente no apartamento, ajeitando o relógio, no apartamento do músico. Né? Aquilo que o músico toca é a música diegética, né? A música que faz parte da história. E, na verdade, a composição que ele toca nem é do Franz Wax, mas é do Leonard Bernstein. Então, você vê que a gente vai escutar a música do Wax só no início do filme. O alívio cômico, que é a Thelma Ritter, fantástico o papel dela, mas nós já vimos esse tipo de senhorazinha, né, que aparece e tem uma certa vivacidade. Né? Então ela é uma massagista, ela dá o suporte, é uma espécie de... faz as compras porque ele está impossibilitado, e ela é extremamente vivaz, mordaz, né, esperta, fofoqueira também. Então ela, de certa forma, é esse alívio cômico, esse ar, né, esse frescor que o Hitchcock sempre coloca nos filmes, por mais pesados que os temas que ele trabalha sejam. Né? Quer dizer, a gente está sempre... acho que sempre deve supor que assassinato, morte não são temas leves. Quer dizer, né? A gente tem se habituado com uma maior frequência né, com isso, mas não deveria ser. Então sempre tem essa figura que é muito colorida, quer dizer, ela dá uma jovialidade, né, a toda vez que ela aparece. Aqui está bem escuro. Bom, vocês vão notar porque é uma sequência muito marcante. Que é a primeira vez que a Grace Kelly aparece. E é uma coisa extremamente importante, como realizador, o Hitchcock faz isso com uma maestria, é como introduzir um personagem, como dar um peso para esse personagem. Aqui eu já mostrei para vocês como ele fez com o James Stewart, quer dizer, ele elabora, ele conta um pouco da história. Aqui a maneira como ela entra é única. Né? Se a gente fosse fazer se eu fosse fazer uma lista dos grandes momentos do cinema, certamente eu ia colocar, né, a chegada dela, a apresentação dela. Primeiro, ele mostra a noite. Faltou, devia ter uma imagem da noite aqui. Ó. Ele está dormindo, né? Nosso mocinho está dormindo, é noite, então existe uma atmosfera quase mágica, né? Uma coisa ligada aos sonhos, às ninfas, e ela surge de uma maneira extremamente irreal. Ela parece que tem uma auréola, né, ao redor dela, quer dizer, ela surge como uma criatura diáfana, e joga uma sombra sobre ele, né? Então, mais uma vez, reforça esse ar quase sobrenatural. E aí, nossa, aqui está muito... O beijo. Isso é um beijo em câmera lenta. E é muito marcante. Né? Parece que você está... você sai do domínio da realidade. O filme, até então, né, ele é extremamente cru, real. Quer dizer, você tem como se estivesse vendo... existe essa tentativa de você recriar com a maior veracidade aquele pequeno universo daquela vila. E aqui, com a chegada dela, isso vira um outro universo, quer dizer, não é mais realidade. Né? Então, a maneira como ela é apresentada é fantástica. E é algo extremamente interessante, esse desequilíbrio entre os dois. Porque ela chega com Dior, ela chega toda com alta costura, ela é uma mulher rica, muito rica, uma mulher sofisticada, uma mulher extremamente poderosa, uma diva, e ele é um caráter de pijama, uma cara de norte-americano, daquele jeito que come, que entra no restaurante francês, prefere comer um hambúrguer, um cachorro-quente no estádio de beisebol. E você tem essa mulher que quer fazer tudo para casar com ele, né? Que se desdobra, se compromete totalmente, né? Essa quase semideusa, um terreno bem, digamos assim, ela é muito areia para o cacife dele. A impressão que eu tenho... E ele está sempre meio, não sei, não quero, não vai dar certo. É uma relação extremamente interessante, né? E nós temos isso em outros filmes do Hitchcock também, né? A mulher, nos pássaros, isso aparece o tempo todo, né? A mulher que de certa forma caça, né? O homem. Aqui isso é muito patente. E o que vai acontecer? Né? Então ele meio, não é, né? A receptividade dele a ela não é muito espontânea, até o momento que eles suspeitam de um assassinato. Então agora aqui eu já estou cortando um monte de coisa da história, tá? Porque não tem muito para ser visto nesse filme. Eles suspeitam que o vizinho da frente, né, cometeu um assassinato, matou a mulher, porque a mulher desapareceu. Eles não viram isso, eles não viram o assassinato, mas eles têm fortes motivos para isso. E é um momento ímpar. É um momento que você tem que prestar muita atenção, porque reforça muito essa questão da análise da figura do Jeffries, do repórter fotográfico, como o espectador, né, como nós somos, né, diante do cinema, né, diante do filme. Porque em determinado momento, a Grace Kelly resolve investigar o crime e resolve sair da plateia, que a plateia é o apartamento, não é, do James Stewart. Então ela sai da plateia do James Stewart porque ele quer ver o filme. A mulher está do lado dele, mas não. Tem a Grace Kelly do lado dele, mas ele quer ver o filme, ele quer ver o lado de fora. Ela sai do apartamento dele, ela sai da plateia e ela entra no filme. Quando ela entra no filme, aí ele fica fascinado. Né? Aí ela se torna a mulher de verdade. Esse é o momento que eles ficam, né, observando, né, e apreensivos com o destino que pode acontecer quando eles querem. E presta atenção quando ela retorna, o olhar dele. Ele também né, mas nesse momento é outro. Agora ele está apaixonado. Porque a atriz de cinema, né, sai. E ele talvez nem tenha se tocado que a atriz de cinema estava sentada ao lado dele, né, implorando para casar com ele. Mas à medida que ela foi para a Terra e voltou, ele está apaixonado. Né? Ele muda, quer dizer, né? É outra coisa. Então tem, né, essa relação, né, dele. E aí o detalhe, eles devem ter usado essa essa miniatura. Porque o Hitchcock sempre, a gente já viu que ele sempre nos engana, usando miniaturas né, para fazer certas planos ou certas filmagens que não são possíveis tecnicamente. Mas o legal é que dificilmente a gente percebe quando isso ocorre. Né? Então, provavelmente em algum momento foi usado esse gesso miniatura. Né? Sei lá quando. E aqui eu não momento de descontração do Hitchcock. Bom, então eu não vou falar muito mais do que isso, porque, como eu falei, o filme é meio longo, e tem um documentário que é um pouco mais longo também, de 55 minutos, né? Então, eu vou talvez comentar mais no meio do filme, mas a ideia é tenta imaginar o filme. E o próximo, também com a Grace Kelly, Disque para Matar. Então, talvez eu comente um pouquinho mais hoje, porque eu não quis me estender muito para que a gente possa conseguir ver o documentário também, porque eu acho que é bem legal o documentário sobre esse filme. Mas então tentem imaginar, tentem refletir sobre essa questão, né, do mocinho, do Stewart, representar a figura do espectador do cinema. Então, a partir disso, fica mais, talvez o filme faça mais sentido e seja melhor apreciado. Algo semelhante, eu já posso adiantar para vocês, pode ser feito no Vértigo, né, do Corpo que Cai. Também é um filme que trabalha com essa questão da metalinguagem, que discute o próprio processo cinematográfico. Deixa eu desafogar aqui para ver que isso está atrapalhando. Desenrolar, e o personagem principal.
Are you over 40? When you wake up in the morning, do you feel tired and run down? Do you have that listless feeling?
Então as demais janelas, né, os demais personagens começam a ser apresentados. Ele chega perto do corredor, você escuta sons dos carros e de crianças. E aí nós voltamos para ele, onde ele vai ser devidamente apresentado. Eu acho... eu não sei se vocês já tinham visto o filme, né? Porque esse é um filme mais famoso, né? Mas eu acho que ele ganha muito se a gente pensa ou analisa em função dessas agora tem o making off, né? Pedi para colocar logo em seguida, porque ele é um pouquinho longo, 55 minutos para vocês se policiarem. Então acho que o filme ganha muito, né, se a gente passa por essa análise, quer dizer, as coisas fazem mais sentido. Não que isso seja necessário, eu acho que sem essa abordagem, o filme por si só já seria igualmente interessante, quer dizer, ele tem um refinamento, o texto, né, a conversa entre eles Não, eu acho que não, é o outro. Não, esse é o outro. Tem dois esse daí, não é o... eu acho que você pegou o segundo. Tem com legendas, é o segundo. Com legendas. Tem o primeiro e o segundo. Eu acho que eu vou conhecer.
Que diálogo que tem esse filme. Nossa, o melhor diálogo que eu já vi. Tô impressionado. Milton,
Oi?
comentando que é o melhor diálogo que eu já vi. Gente, é impressionante.
Ele tinha, porque na realidade, isso é uma coisa que ele sempre se preocupou, porque normalmente ele, o roteiro basicamente, o roteiro, se a gente pensar a encenação, ele já tinha definido, mas ele sempre contratava alguém, algum escritor, para escrever o texto, né?
To focus with him. We all become voyeurs and we see these various dramas unfolding.
I see bickering and family quarrels, and mysterious tricks at night, knives and saws and ropes. And now since last evening, no sign of the what?
The way that he was able to shoot that was just unbelievable.
You asked for something dramatically different. You got it.
It was really a masterpiece of Hitchcock's construction.
Generally, the more important the film, the worse condition the original negative and sound elements are going to be in, and Rear Window is no different than many others.
Tell me everything you saw.
Vertigo, the man who knew too much trouble with Harry, we realized the horrible state that all these Hitchcock pictures were in. If something really wasn't done about them, they were going to be lost forever.
If one were to ask, what are the movies of Alfred Hitchcock like? Somebody that knew nothing about movies. You could show them Rear Window and, in a sense, touch on everything in Hitchcock. You would immediately see his technical brilliance. You would see his ability to tell a story in a uniquely captivating way. He certainly had his humor.
Why don't you shut up?
And thematically, you deal with voyeurism, you deal with guilt, you deal with relationships, you deal with sexuality.
No,
We're open.
right. I'm going to stay with you.
It's all there in Rear Window.
Rear Window is sort of Hitchcock's testament film. I mean, it's a French term, meaning that in Rear Window, perhaps you see the best example of what Hitchcock's cinema at its best stood for, which was essentially the use of the subjective point of view. You have a shot of Jimmy Stewart, you show what he's looking at, you see his reaction.
Daquilo que eu comentei, eu tentei sempre pensar nos filmes, sempre tem um momento que ele trabalha muito essa coisa do ponto de vista subjetivo. Esse filme é todo sobre isso, né?
Filmmaking. And he has an incredible ability to put you in the point of view of the leading character, or whatever character. And he does it with considerable dexterity. And it's particularly noticeable, obviously, in Rear Window, where the entire picture plays in one apartment.
You can have a man look, you can have him see something, you can have him react to it. You can make him react in various ways. You see, you can make him look at one thing, look at another. Without him speaking, you can show his mind at work, comparing things. It's limitless, I would say, the power of cutting and showing the various images, the assembly of them, you know, the juxtaposition of imagery relating to the mind of the individual.
It was really a masterpiece of Hitchcock's construction. He worked on the script with the writer, as he always did. And the writers liked to work with him too, because he was stimulating. His ideas were always visual, cinematic. He never took a screen credit for writing, but I'd say he contributed at least half of the plot, working on the plot.
He knew a lot about crime. He had a fascination for English crime, and in fact one of his crime things was, and in fact he used part of it in Rear Window, was Dr. Crippen. And this was a famous English case where he fell in love with the secretary and killed the wife and buried the wife in the backyard, and then took the secretary on a boat to get away and dressed the secretary up as a sailor. And the thing was that the captain said later on he had wondered why these two sailors were very friendly towards each other. And that's how they called Dr. Crippen. But he loved them. He had a whole set of stories at home. Rear Window was based on a short story entitled It Had to Be Murder, published in 1942. It was written by Cornell Woolridge. His real name was, in fact, William Irish, and many of his books were made into movies. My father hired John Michael Hayes to adapt the short story. Mr. Hayes was a man of radium who had impressed my dad with his appreciation and knowledge of Shadow of a Doubt. He went on to write 4 films for my father.
Nós vamos ver esse também.
The screenplay of Rear Window was very different from the book. The story was transposed to Manhattan for the film. The most important element missing in the short story is the romance, which plays a major role in the film.
In the short story, it was just the Raymond Burr murdering his wife and Jimmy Stewart, watching. That was the only story. There was no Grace Kelly, there was no Thelma Ritter, there was no Miss Torso, there was no composer, there was nothing. It was just that story. So all of these little scenes, came together to make this work.
That's a secret private word you're looking into out there. People do a lot of things in private they couldn't possibly explain in public.
Like disposing of their wives.
Get that idea right in your mind will only lead in the wrong direction. What about the knife and the saw? Did you ever own a saw?
There's that ridiculous comment about actors being callow or whatever that is attributed to Hitchcock.
Oh, the couple hundred knives you probably owned your lifetime.
Be that as it may, the performances in Rear Window from top to bottom are brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. As they were in many of Hitchcock's pictures.
Jimmy Stewart, who made quite a lot of pictures with my father. My father loved him because Jimmy represented to the audience the ordinary man. So that a man that goes to see that picture, he can identify Jimmy Stewart, where a lot of others he couldn't. Jimmy was a very sweet, kind person. And actually, there was not a lot of difference between Jimmy the actor and Jimmy the person. What you saw is what you got with him.
I had never worked with Jimmy Stewart before he came to Paramount to do Rear Window. But I found Jimmy Stewart to be a charming man, to men as well as women. He was easy to like, easy to work with, and always carried his screenplay under his arm when he wasn't actually in a scene, and always was prepared when he walked on the set. And he was the kindest man, and everybody was very fond of Jimmy Stewart. He and Hitch were like brothers. You could even occasionally see a little smile appear on Hitchcock's face when he and Jimmy were together.
He and my father got along so well, and I really think that Rear Window was one of their happiest pictures.
Oh, yeah.
Reading from top to bottom. Lisa. Carol. Fremont.
Grace Kelly was one of the nicest people I've ever known. I think my father's feeling about Grace was she epitomized what he thought of the cool blonde with the fire beneath. She and my father were very close, and my mother, and I can remember going over on Sundays, and Grace was over, and it would all depend who she was going with at that particular time. But she was a brilliant actress. He could just tell her in a few words, you know, what he wanted. And she was able to give it to him. She was very, very talented.
I fell in love with her the moment I saw her on that set of Ballet for Murder. Everybody fell in love with her.
É o próximo filme que nós vamos ver.
Kelly, who were fortunate enough to work with her. And she was actually, I think, the most beautiful woman I ever saw in my life on film. There is a close-up of her in Rear Window. When she comes to see Jimmy, it's an introductory shot in the picture, and it's really the most beautiful shot of a woman I've ever seen in my life.
There are two questions that confront James Stewart's character, Jeffrey, in Rear Window. One is, what's going on in his personal life? Is he going to marry Grace Kelly or not? And what's going on outside the window of his apartment, in the windows of all the apartments across the way? To some degree, to avoid looking at his own problem, he focuses on what's going on out there, and we're allowed to focus with him. And we all become voyeurs, and we see these various dramas unfolding that are all in one way or another illustrating life in relationships, for better or ill. People that want a relationship and can't have one, Miss Lonely Hearts, the couple across the way that are fighting all the time, the newlyweds that are apparently having sex all the time, and we, meanwhile, are watching Grace Kelly come into his apartment and present the promise of a relationship that could be unbelievably good, but that he's resisting.
You mean leave the magazine?
Yes.
For what?
For yourself and me.
Jeffries, and at times other characters, use the apartments opposite as a kind of cinema screen. And they do what I think most of us do when we watch movies. They partly identify with other people. They partly compare their lives to other people's lives. They use these lives to talk about their own lives in various ways.
It's about time you got married, before you turned into a lonesome and bitter old man.
Yeah, you just see me rushing home to a hot apartment to listen to the automatic laundry and the electric dishwasher and the garbage disposal, the nagging wife.
So you could say that Stewart has a lot of different choices in the movie. You know, the original story doesn't have a love interest, but in fact that seems to be the thing that interests Hitchcock the most.
I'm not ready for marriage.
Every man is ready for marriage when the right girl comes along. Lisa Fremont is the right girl for any man with half a brain who could get one idol.
The scenes between Jimmy Stewart and Thelma Ritter, she was just marvelous. She revealed a lot of the life of Jimmy Stewart in those scenes with Jimmy. You didn't know much about Jimmy Stewart until she started playing those scenes.
Look, Mr. Jeffries, I'm not an educated woman, but I can tell you one thing. When a man and a woman see each other and like each other, they come together, wham, like a couple of taxis on Broadway.
The humor that Thelma Ritter brought to Rear Window was absolutely wonderful. And my father, he loved that because he knew that you couldn't keep going and keep going. You had to give the audience a break. You had to have them laugh at something. His whole life was the importance of having a sense of humor in whatever you do.
The thing that we all loved about Hitchcock forever is his ability to deal with these very grim subjects, to deal with our darkest fears and emotions, but deal with them with humor.
Just where do you suppose he cut her up? Because the bathtub. That's the only place where he could have washed away the blood.
All the different characters were so well cast. They had Thelma Ritter, Wendell Corey, and of course Ray Burr as the murderer.
When Mr. Hitchcock started casting the picture, he left certain departments for me to cast. He cast the very important ones like Raymond Burr and his wife, the composer, Ross Bagdasarian, Miss Lonely Hearts, and the couple with the little dog, and left the others for me to cast. I cast them all from people that had worked with me in the past. Mr. Hitchcock said he would like to have a ballet dancer do the part of Miss Torso, but he said, I don't want her to appear as a professional ballet dancer. And he said, when you find the right person, don't you dare let her go to the dance department and rehearse or be taught steps for the scenes she's going to be doing in there. I want you to give her a record of the music and let her figure out her own moves and things.
Hitchcock left the choreography up to me. You know, it was kind of like a wing it. You know, he was not very, he didn't care too much about getting everything perfect. You know, I think he liked to see a little whatever you had to do. So I remember going to a bungalow one day with the music, and Herbie Coleman, who was the assistant director, I remember saying, oh, I'm so scared, I don't want to do this. I need a choreographer. He said, no, you're going to be fine.
She said, I'm scared to death. I have the slightest idea what to do. So I had to go over there with her and talk to her about this. I said, I'm not going to try to tell you what ballet steps you need, but I said, certainly not a rehearsed kind of a step.
And I went and I fiddled around and came up with a couple of steps.
So he saw the routine, thought it was great.
What do you think?
I think Edith Head was one of the most important people that my father worked with, and he thought the same way. My father costumes and
personagens incríveis, né?
And especially with Edith Head. He felt that the costumes, color, style, everything, had to help the scene. It was all part of the feeling and the character. He didn't just say, oh, wear this, you know.
Well, if there's one thing I know, it's how to wear the proper clothes.
He and Edith worked terribly closely together on the costumes long before he really cast the picture.
Why didn't I say there was something more comfortable?
Edith had designed all the clothes that I wore, whatever was left of them, not too much. And they painted every inch of my body, every day. And I mean, I came to work the next day sometimes with still some of it left on me because I couldn't reach all the parts that they covered.
I can remember going on the set of Rear Window, and it was fascinating. I think of all the pictures that he made, that was the most fascinating set to go on, because you literally saw all the different apartments, all the different people.
Mac Johnson was the art director on Rear Window. Mac came in and told me about this picture, and how was he going to do it? So he had to do this whole courtyard, and we didn't have stages that high, and so I suggested to him, Paramount show wasn't a real large studio, but 2 or 3 of the stages, we stored furniture underneath. So I told Mac, I said, why don't you cut the floor out?
They were going to cut the floor out, remove everything from the basement, and make Jimmy Stewart's second floor room on the actual stage level. And the lawns and the first floor are going to be the basement floor.
He said, well, they wouldn't let me do that, would they? I said, well, I bet they will for Hitchcock. And sure enough, they did. They let him.
The set went from the bottom of that basement to the grids, and that it was an enormous problem for the lighting crew, and very hot for anybody who had to work up there at the top, because We didn't have the same kind of lighting that we have today. We didn't have the same film. We didn't have the same camera lenses. So all of it conspired against us. It was really an enormous task, and the people who had to work up there took a beating, and the actors took a beating up there too.
And in fact, we found this out from Georgie and Darcy the other day, that the set was lit for 4 time periods of the day.
They had for the morning, the afternoon, twilight, and then at nighttime. So they didn't have to do changing all the lights for every shot. They would just nighttime, and all the lights would change automatically. It was wonderful. It was like a little city. And there was Hitchcock. It's like a big old dollhouse that he was playing with there, you know. But it was a great set, and people came from all over the world to view it, to take pictures of it. I think it had been written up in Life or Look magazine. And then, of course, you know, we wore the little earpieces. And we could not talk back to Mr. Hitchcock, but he could talk to us. But one day, Hitchcock called me, and he said he wanted me to watch something. He was getting ready to shoot the scene of the couple on the fire escape. They had a mattress on the fire escape, and it started to rain. So he told the wife to take her earpiece out, and he gave the direction to the husband. Then he asked the husband to take his out, and he gave the direction to the wife. Now he said to me, he turned around and he winked. He said, "I watch this." Now he'd given them both different directions. The husband was pulling the mattress to the one window, the wife was pulling the mattress to the other. They were going back, and they were fighting. And you could hear do-do-do-do-do-do. And finally, he pulled the mattress, and somebody fell into the window. And it was quite funny and real. Those are the kinds of things that he would do.
One of his great talents, of course, was that he saw the film in his head and knew just where to be at every given moment. There was a reason why he was where he was. One of the great things about Hitchcock is that he, you know, and most of the great directors, but Hitchcock is a notable example of a man, of a director who's always got the camera in the right place for each given moment, and it's always there for a reason. It's not there arbitrarily or just because it might be nice to shoot it from there now. And it's never decorative, and it's never just frivolous. It's always with a point and a reason. The 2 greatest schools of cinema in the silent era were the American and the German. Because he was trained by the Americans and the Germans, he understood that telling a story visually was what movies were about. So you can see in all his films, he's striving to tell the story visually. So in Rear Window, I think you introduced Jimmy Stewart with, you see his broken leg, you see a broken camera, you see he's a photographer, you see a magazine cover, etc. All done in one continuous shot, as I remember, where you are told, okay, this is what you're seeing, this is what it is, and the audience understands it as a result very quickly. That's, again, really good storytelling, and what Hitchcock was particularly good at.
He had already, in his mind, made that movie. He had already drawn every single shot. So that he always said when he got on the set, that it was a little boring making the picture.
Everything was in the screenplay. The cameraman knew all the time what he was expected to deliver on the film. And when Mr. Tucker walked in the morning, the camera was usually all ready to go. The lights were set, the actors were in place, and they were all ready to go.
The way that he was able to shoot that, looking in at all the different apartments, was just unbelievable. And that's why it was so fascinating being on the set. You literally saw these apartments. I mean, they were all real. You know, people were in them. It was fascinating.
What I think is being shown here seems to me one of the absolutely central themes of all Hitchcock's work. And this goes right back to the British period, it goes right through the American films. The terrible incompatibility of male and female positions as they've been defined and have evolved within our culture.
According to you, people should be born and then die on the same spot. Come on!
The man's viewpoint is one thing, the woman's viewpoint is always another. They argue, and with all this is the idea of romantic love, what Miss Lonely Hearts is longing for, what the newlyweds were expecting, what Lisa wants. And I think Hitchcock's view of romantic love is extremely skeptical, to say the least.
What would you think of starting off with dinner at 21?
Will you have perhaps an ambulance downstairs?
Better than right. 21.
You know, Hitchcock obviously had a very complicated relationship with food himself, and here in Rear Window, you have Grace Kelly, one of the most beautiful actresses ever to grace the screen, playing one of the most incredibly idealized females in movie history, and she's having to be seducing James Stewart by demonstrating her ability to provide food to him. And she literally brings almost a restaurant into that apartment to cater to his every whim.
At least you can't say the dinner isn't right.
Lisa, it's perfect. As always.
Stewart's character in Rear Window, like a lot of Hitchcock characters, is rather ambiguous. He's wrong a number of times. He seems to be wrong about Grace Kelly. It's interesting that the biggest close-up that Hitchcock gives Jimmy Stewart is at that moment when she gets finally interested in the murder, and actually when she risks her life, and she comes back very excited from having gone over there. He looks at her with tremendous affection at that moment because she's become adventurous, and he's kind of an adventurer.
Wasn't that close? What was his reaction? I mean, when he looked at the note.
Well, it wasn't the kind of an expression that would get him a quick loan at the bank.
It's almost as though he's testing her, and she's doing what she does in a way to get his affection.
Isn't Grace Kelly the dominant partner in the relationship? Not knowing she actually does everything. He's basically impotent in the picture.
Pretty well. Oh yeah, she's a very active, he's a typical active New York woman. There are many of those in New York, you know, work for Harper's Bazaar, you know, they're almost like men in some of these movies.
Yeah.
Mr. Hitchcock always discussed the scene with the cameraman first, and he would tell him what lens to use and what he wanted to include in the scene.
Bob Burks was a wonderful talent and a hard-working, lovely man, and he was enjoyable to be around. He'd been with Hitch for several films, of course, and had terrific knowledge of what Hitch required, and he worked very hard, took it very seriously, sometimes too seriously, almost get sick over certain shots that he was trying to accomplish for Hitch. But a wonderful man and a very great talent.
Shooting in Jimmy's apartment was very difficult because it was small. It wasn't big, and Hitch never liked to use wide-angle lenses. The lens that Hitch liked to use was a 50 millimeter, and that's about what your eyes see.
Everything we see in that story is told from either James Stewart's point of view, or there's that very dramatic moment where Hitchcock takes the audience into his confidence and says, I am now showing you something that James Stewart, who's asleep, is not seeing. And it lets us get ahead of James Stewart. That's Hitchcock's recipe for suspense, because suddenly now we're going, oh my God, what's going to happen when James Stewart, who up till now has been us, finds out what we know? This is Hitchcock's genius of making us complicit in what's going on.
I always remember Lejeune of The Observer called it a horrible film, because a man was looking in windows, you know. Oh, what a crappy remark, because who cares, you know, about that kind of thing, because everybody is tipped, a known fact, you know, that provided you don't make it too vulgar, you know.
People are
indeed. People are a point of curiosity. People don't go who you are, can't resist.
Gunnison, how did you ever get to be such a big editor with such a small memory?
Thrift industry and hard work, and catching a publisher with a secretary.
Then there was a screenplay, there was a scene in Jimmy Stewart's boss's office. His name was Gunnison. And I didn't think they should ever go away from the Grimm's Village set. And I remember that day that he finished the dictation with John Maynard Hayes. We walked into my office and Mr. Hitchcock said, Mr. Coleman, I think we need to salute the screenplay of Rear Window. And he said, what do you think about the screenplay? And I said, I only have one comment, Mr. Hitchcock. I said, I don't think you should ever go away from the Greenwich Village set. I think that you shouldn't use Gunnison's office. And we discussed it a couple of minutes, and it was the last heard of it, until the day we had finished shooting a scene with Jimmy Stewart on the big set in his apartment. And I sent Jimmy home, and we were moving to the new stage where the Gunnison's office had been built. And Mr. Hitchcock and I were walking together on the way to the new set when he stopped and said, by this time we were now Hitch and Herbie. He said, Herbie, do you still have the same feeling about Gunnison's office? I said, yes, Hitch, I do, and I don't think you should ever go away from the Greenwich Village set. He said, well, cancel, we won't shoot it. And I said, oh, I think we should go ahead and shoot it because the actors are there, the set's been built. And you'll have the dialogue in case you ever want to let the audience hear Gunnison's voice. So we've already shot the scenes, but we never used in the picture, just Gunnison's voice.
You're too valuable in the magazine for us to play around with. I'll send Morgan or Lamb.
Morgan or Lamb, that's fine. I get myself half killed for you, and you reward me by stealing my assignments.
I didn't ask you to stand in the middle of that automobile racetrack.
I think one of Hitchcock's central concerns is the isolation of people within our society. The apartments reflect the sense that everybody is in a prison.
You've got to get me out of here. 6 weeks sitting in a 2-room apartment with nothing to do but look out the window at the neighbors.
Each person is in his or her own little prison. And that all comes to a head, of course, and what I see is the sort of crucial scene of the film, from this point of view anyway. The scene where the woman comes out on her balcony and sees her dog has been killed, and accuses all the neighbors.
You know the meaning of the word neighbor. Neighbors like each other, speak to each other, care if anybody lives or dies, but none of you do. But I couldn't imagine anything being so low that you kill a little helpless, friendly dog. The only thing in this whole neighborhood liked anybody.
It's a kind of central statement, I think, in Hitchcock, this whole idea of people not being able to reach out.
You think of several films of his which were very limited in terms of the location. Rope all plays in one apartment. Lifeboat all plays in a lifeboat. Dial M for Murder, basically with very few exceptions, plays in the London flat of Grace Kelly and Ray Lamb. Rear Window all plays in Jimmy Stewart's room. Of course, there is a whole world going on up there. You see a part of the street, which, just a little bit part of the street. But he really doesn't go out there into the courtyard once or twice, but always in long shot or certain wide shots. Even when the dog is killed, when he does cut a little bit closer. So he liked to limit himself in that way.
In Rear Window, Hitchcock uses very sparing, precise sound and music to create the sounds and atmosphere of the world in which that story takes place, a world that is defined by that courtyard.
You basically had no score. The only music was when somebody was playing music across the way. Somebody was listening to a record and you'd hear it, or somebody was playing the piano and you'd hear it. But other than that, there was no score, which was a very unusual and, at that time, rather daring soundtrack. It gives a kind of verisimilitude and a sense that nobody's intruding on this, that this is real. And Hitchcock was aware of that.
The interesting thing is how he shot it in order to get the sound quality that he did. I mean, he actually shot live sound from Jimmy Stewart's point of view to capture the distance between the window that Stewart was sitting in and the various apartments across the way. So there's that hollow sound in there, which is pretty genuine.
Rear Window was the last of 4 pictures that Franz Waxman composed scores for Hitchcock films. First was Rebecca in 1940, which was followed by Suspicion in 1941, and then The Parodying Case, and finally Rear Window. And the score comes 2 years after Place in the Sun, which was his Academy Award-winning score, also at Paramount, with his famous saxophone love theme, lush love theme for Elizabeth Taylor. And it was historically today considered one of the first jazz scores. And in a way, Rear Window is a little bit in that idiom. It opens with the jazz, which is supposed to be the streets of Greenwich Village, circa 1950s.
Isso é o que pra gente é difícil de perceber, quer dizer, a ideia que o jazz, nessa época, ainda não era um gênero musical plenamente aceito ou executado, né?
And we recorded it for Rear Window. The use of source music was not uncommon in films. In those days, if they used source music, in the case of Rear Window, Paramount's publishing arm, which was famous music, they took a famous or popular song at the time, like That's Amore. So you do hear That's Amore in one scene.
O Dean Martin costumava cantar essa música, That's Amore. Dean Martin, que é o parceiro, né, dos filmes do Jerry Lewis.
Was given the company music catalog and said, you know, choose here.
Where's that wonderful music coming from?
The song, Lisa, is an integral part of the development of the story, where a piece is being put together before your very eyes and ears. It begins where a struggling songwriter is trying to find the melody and the harmony and develop something. And throughout the course of the film, he finds the song, which you finally hear full-blown at the end. Miss Lonely Hearts, a very tragic character who was across the courtway from Jimmy Stewart, is inspired by this, and hearing this music actually saves her life.
Mr. Jeffries, the music stopped.
One of the reasons his movies last as well as they do is not only his technical brilliance, obviously, but it's Hitchcock's humanity. Hitchcock's ability to deal with every man. And Hitchcock finds humanity even in his darkest villains. There's something always sympathetic about his villains. You know, Norman Bates is an incredibly sympathetic character to me, certainly the way that Anthony Perkins portrayed him. And even in Rear Window, where we only know Raymond Burr from peeping through his window from across the courtyard, and we begin to suspect this man, and we ultimately become afraid of him. But at the same time, you find yourself being oddly sympathetic with him and feel that he was trapped in that life over there and driven to what he did.
Look, the wedding ring. Turn off the light, see nothing.
At that film, we're on Stewart's side all the way through the picture because basically you have made us, the audience, peeping Toms too. But isn't there something rather pathetic about, rather sympathetic about Burr's murderous confrontation at the end? And Stewart doesn't even answer him.
Tom, you know, the poor man, you know, says, why, you know, it's the climax of the peeping Tomism, isn't it?
Yes.
Really?
Why did you do it?
Why'd you do it? If you hadn't been a peeping Tom, I'd have gotten away with it.
Yeah. But at that point in the film, for the first time, one really says to oneself, you know, well, Stewart's a bit of a bastard.
What do you want from me? Your friend, the girl, could have turned me in. Why didn't she?
Do you feel a great deal of sympathy for Burr there? He tells his wife to do that, and Stewart doesn't even answer.
What can he say?
What can he say? It's true. He's really caught, in the sense he's caught with his pants down for the first time.
Yeah.
Isn't
caught with his plaster down. Can you get me that ring back? No. Tell her to bring it back. I can't. The police have it by now.
I think another of Hitchcock's central concerns is the way in which people build these protective facades around themselves and claim this as their identity. It's a way of defending themselves against the unpredictability and chaos of life. All the things we don't understand and don't know, not simply in the world but within ourselves. And Jeffries has this, certainly his job, his camera. Jeffries uses the camera at the end as his protection against Thorwald, the camera being a symbol of his whole existence, of course. And the inadequacy of that becomes clear. The flashes hold Thorwald back, but they don't stop him. They delay it, but they don't stop him.
Soon after the finish of the screenplay, I got worried about the scenes when Raymond Burr comes to kill Jimmy Stewart. And Jimmy Stewart had nothing to protect himself with except flashbulbs. So I decided to have a test with Bob Burks and Hitchler and John Fulton, the special effects head, and a few other people there, and I'd get their impression of what Raymond Burr would see when Jimmy Stewart flashed the flashbulb in his face. So I arranged a meeting in the art department, and I had a stillman there with flash bulbs, and I had flash those bulbs in our faces, and then ask everybody what they saw as a result of that flash in their eyes. And we all agreed that we saw kind of a faint yellow mist, and everybody agreed it just blocked out, this mist just blocked out everything. And we went away, and one day I got a call from John Fulton who'd like to show this to us. So I got Bob Burks and the people who were going to be involved in this, and I went to see it, and I didn't tell Hitch about it. So I went to see it, and what I saw on the screen I couldn't believe. Floating through the air were rings. They looked to be about an inch wide and like a hoop. And they were all different colors floating through the air. And none of the effect we saw at all. So when it was over, I said to John, I said, I'm going to let Mr. Hitchcock think that this is the kind of work that John Fulton turns out. We insisted that Mr. Fulton redo the color that came over the faces, and it turned out to be what was finally used, a faint red color.
In Rear Window, where Jimmy Stewart is thrown out of the window at the end. I just photographed that with feet, legs, arms, heads, completely montaged. I also photographed it from a distance, a complete action. There was no comparison between the two, there never is. You know, barroom fights or whatever they do in Westerns when they knock the heavy or the one man knocks another across the table which breaks. They all break a table in bars, you know.
Or the railing.
Oh, the railing, whatever it is, you know. They're always shot at the distance, but it's much more effective if it's done in montage, which will involve the audience much more. That's the secret of that type of montage in films.
I've heard the story, I don't know if it's true or not, that when they finished the editing of the picture, they took all the trims and outtakes and just put them all on one reel. That's how few trims there were.
They only shot a scene up to a certain point. Then he would change the angle of the camera and start back and maybe a frame or two frames and start the new scene. And then he would just stop and go to another way. That's the way he shot his pictures. So very simple for the young guy.
Sorry, Jeff, I got as fast as I could.
Mr. Jeffries, don't let anybody touch me. Get my medical bag from upstairs.
Oh, please, it's so young, anything that happened to you. Gee, I'm proud of you.
What the film eventually moves to at the end is a kind of resolution of the Jeffries-Lisa relationship. A lot of people have found it merely cynical because Lisa, although she's dressed in adventure-type clothes, presumably ready to take off with Jeffries on some expedition, and is reading a book called Beyond the High Himalayas or something like that, puts it aside when she sees he's asleep and picks up Harper's Bazaar. But it seems to me that what Hitchcock is saying there is not exactly cynical, it's realistic. Male and female positions are, within the culture, incompatible, within the culture as it existed then, as to a great extent it exists now. Lisa is showing us at the end that she must retain a certain perspective of her own and interests of her own, that she will not abandon her own interests in life and her own values in life for his, and I think that's wonderful.
The last day of filming on stage 17 at Paramount on Rear Window really was a very sad day for all of us, because we'd been on that picture for a long, long time, and we'd all become very close friends. I remember when they opened the big doors, and Grace Kelly and Hitch and Bob Burks and I all walked out at the same time, and it was a drizzle, slight rain coming down, and we all stopped and looked back at the set, and all the lights were going up in various places on the set until it was complete darkness inside. And Grace said, you know, it's almost like leaving home to leave the stage.
Show's over for tonight. Preview of coming attractions.
A real restoration is gathering together all of the materials that exist on a film throughout the world, going through each of them, and bringing together the best of those elements, both picture and sound, to create a preservation negative, which can in effect take the place of the original camera negative, which is either unusable or parts are unusable.
The project started when we actually acquired the films for Universal in 1984.
This is Jimmy Stewart, and I want to tell you about a very special event. The return of 5 Hitchcock pictures unseen for more than a decade.
A Disney faz isso também. A Disney às vezes segura os filmes e não reexibe.
The films from the Hitchcock Foundation, actually leased them for a period of 5 years at that time. But it was at that time when Bob and I got together, we realized the horrible state that all these pictures were in, and that if something really wasn't done about them, they were going to be lost forever.
To me, this is Hitchcock at his best. Leader! Dial!
One of the interesting things about films, especially classic films, is that generally the more important the film, the better the film, the worse condition the original negative and sound elements are going to be in. And Rear Window is no different than many others. Normally in large format films, Spartacus and Lawrence of Arabia and
My Fair Lady, Vertigo,
any film shot in 65mm, all of the original prints were made from the original camera negative. But for Perf 35, which is the way that Rear Window was shot, it's unusual, at least when you get into the 50s and 60s, that they would have used an original camera negative from which to create a number of prints. But to our horror, when we first pulled the original camera negative out on Rear Window, we found that there were 389 release prints made on the camera negative during the 50s and 60s, before wet-gate printing. One was a lab would put a lacquer on the original negative, and they'd run it, make as many prints as they needed. At which point, when the lacquer began to get scratched, they would remove the lacquer and then re-lacquer it. When that would get scratched, they'd re-lacquer it again. Well, when they removed the lacquer from this reel of Rear Window, they actually stripped away about 40% of the yellow layer. And one of the things that held us up initially was that we had to come up with an entirely new preservation concept of replacing only the yellow layer to an original negative where it was gone. And this was done without computers. And we did it in league with Pacific Title.
One of the things we deal with all the time on these restorations is whether we go for sharpness or color. When you deal with a close-up, such as the entrance of Grace Kelly into the picture, one of the great entrances into a film, We're really trying to deal with sharpness to the nth degree. And this was a particularly difficult shot, and it's the shot where we see her moving toward Jimmy Stewart and then moving into the slow motion kiss. These are moments that are of such impact in a film that we want to make them as perfect as we can.
And that shot was gone. It was actually gone by 1962 in the film's first reissue, which was actually dye transfer. And the color is bad in 1962. By the time we got the negative, the yellow layer was 90% gone. We printed the shot and it came out a wonderful shade of orangey green. And this was why we actually had to take 6 months and work out a way of putting back that yellow layer.
We try to go through camera reports. We look at all of the extras that were in the film. We try and find the set designers. We try and find the publicists who were working on the film because they had an overview of the picture. You know, at that point, they also had a lot of information about how it played to the audiences of the day and could give us a real comparison. We talk to the director's assistants. We talk to the director if we can, but it's the last few films we've done. We've unfortunately not had a director to work with. But these are all important not only to this record that we try to keep, but it also addresses the ethical side of doing film restorations, which is, you know, should we change something? Can we change something? Do we have the right to change something? And this gives us an insight into, say, in this case, Hitchcock's point of view on the film.
Let's go down and find out what's buried in the garden.
Why not? I've always wanted to meet Mrs. Thorwald.
We're going to play this to audiences who don't know how it's going to end. And those are the best audiences because that's when you really see the value of this film and you really see how these Hitchcock films hold up over the years from the standpoint of dialogue, from the standpoint of acting, from the standpoint of concept, from the standpoint of directing. They're really pieces of our heritage and they have to be saved because what's going to happen to our grandchildren or our great-grandchildren? They're not going to be able to see these. And this is why we try to impress on studio executives that they are just the guardians of these films. They're like curators of a museum. Sure, they have to make it pay. Sure, they have to balance their books. Sure, they have to come up with new concepts. But they also have to maintain their libraries. They have to maintain the heritage of the industry.
There are a lot of entities out there today which are using the term restoration as a marketing tool. And it not only damages the concept of film restoration worldwide, but it damages the films and really is shortening the lives of the films that people are saying are restored, when in fact they're not, because no one's going to bother to restore them.
It's something that takes a very, very long time to do, the quality of restorations that we do, and to maintain the standards that we've set for ourselves in an industry, by the way, that has no standards. There is no standards whatsoever in the restoration community. This is something that we're trying to address, and it's been very, very difficult.
I wonder if it's ethical to watch a man with binoculars and a long focus lens. Do you suppose it's ethical even if you prove that he didn't commit a crime?
I'm not much on Rear Window ethics.
Rear Window is one of those pictures where you just feel that everything in that movie is perfectly realized, exactly the way that Hitchcock imagined it. And we are able to be, in a sense, caught up in the storytelling on the one hand, but also overwhelmed by its perfection on the other.
The salesman's looking out of his window, you see. Get back. You'll see it.
I'm not sure. I haven't looked at it before.
It's no ordinary look. It's the kind of look a man gives when he's afraid somebody might be watching him.
I think Rear Window was a film that he liked and was fond of and proud of. I think Rear Window shows them the absolute peak of his powers. I think it's also the beginning of his last great period. I think from there on, I mean, he doesn't make a wrong move.
Somebody said there are two kinds of people in the world. There are people who are, we could call them voyeurs, or anyway, people who observe the world and pass it by. And there are people who are active, adventurers who are part of the world. Would you say you were a person who observed?
Observed, sure.
So then you must, in a way, identify with Jimmy Stewart's character in Rear Window.
Oh, possibly, yes.
Those are just a few of my neighbors. First I watched them just to kill time, but then I couldn't take my eyes off them, just as you will be able to.
I was visiting him at the St. Regis, I think it was when mining was open, in '64, I think. We had a few drinks in his room, then we went to the elevator going down. And we get in the elevator and it's silence from the 24th floor to the 18th floor. And on the 18th floor, 3 people come in dressed for dinner. And Hitch turns to me out of the blue and says, "Oh, it was quite horrible, you know. He was lying there in a pool of blood. Blood coming out of his ear. Blood coming out of his nose." And I thought, what on earth is he talking about? You know, I'd had a little drink and I thought, well, maybe I missed something. And I felt like an idiot. I was listening to him. And the doors open on the 15th floor, more people come in. He goes on and he says, "Oh, it was really quite horrible. I mean, you know, there was blood all everywhere, all over the room." I said, "Good God, what's happened to you?" And you know what he said. And at this point, he says that the doors open to the lobby. Everybody in the elevator, of course, knew who he was anyway. He was very well known. Sort of hesitated. You know, they didn't want to leave the elevator when you hear what happened. Of course, he didn't say a word, so they all had to get out. And Hitch just walks right by, and they're all kind of clustered near the front of the elevator, listening. He starts walking across the lobby. So I'm completely confused. I don't know what's going on. So I said, so what did he say, Hitch? He said, "What? Oh, nothing. That's just my elevator story." So obviously that was something he did quite often in elevators, just to amuse himself.
Bom, hoje passamos um pouco do tempo, né? O filme é longo e o documentário também. De qualquer forma, não sei se vocês já tinham visto esse filme.
Já.
Espero que vocês tenham conseguido vê-lo de outra forma, né? Eu acho que ele, mesmo com a parte mais óbvia, eu acho que já é um grande filme, mas esse, o subtexto que está ali embutido faz com que o filme realmente seja, acho, uma dos filmes mais significativos da trajetória dele, né? Acho que certamente é um dos filmes mais importantes, quer dizer, pela perfeição da maneira como ele conta, da técnica utilizada. De certa forma, é a somatória de todas essas experiências que ele vai realizando ao longo dos outros filmes que estão aí. Quer dizer, a gente pode sintetiza não só a carreira do Hitchcock, mas também sobre o próprio cinema. Muito da questão, do voyeurismo que está embutido na ideia do cinema está presente aí. Eu acho que essa discussão a respeito de como nós nos comportamos como espectadores está nesse filme. Então eu acho que se tivesse que passar um único filme, certamente seria esse. Alguém quer fazer algum comentário, já que nós estamos meio adiantados na hora, mas ainda...
É espetacular.
Não é? Eu acho que, de certa forma, nós vamos ver ainda coisas muito boas. Quer dizer, para mim, o melhor, quer dizer, é uma questão pessoal, é um complicado, mas Se eu tivesse que passar, como eu disse, se eu tivesse que passar um único filme, seria esse. Né? Porque eu acho que ele, de certa forma, ele tem, né, é uma aula de fazer cinema. Né? E ele sintetiza, de certa forma, uma série de procedimentos, né, a coisa do olhar e a montagem, está tudo ali, quer dizer, a ousadia, mas é uma ousadia que é acessível, né, ele faz um filme extremamente ousado, sem uma música, né, para dar um suporte em termos de suspense. O filme é muito ousado, quer dizer, na construção, no espaço, e mesmo assim ele é plenamente acessível. A gente pode nos divertir com a exibição do filme sem, de repente, nos tocar, quer dizer, ele não esfrega na nossa cara uma sofisticação que o filme tem. Né? Então, talvez esse seja o grande mérito, né, da carreira dele, principalmente nesse filme.
A própria questão do cenário, né?
É um cenário.
Nossa, imagina quebrar o estúdio, usar o porão e fazer aquilo e a gente ainda acreditar que é uma vila. Não é a Vila do Chaves.
Não.
Não,
certamente não é.
É algo muito absurdo.
E essa história desse microcosmos, né, que ele constrói. E isso fica claro quando eles dizem que não tinha no roteiro original, né, na história original, ele coloca tudo e ele não assume, quer dizer, ele não precisa colocar o nome dele como roteirista, certamente, né, o filme ganha muito com a participação tentar imaginar esse filme sem a Lisa, sem a Grace Kelly, é quase impossível.
Verdade.
É muito importante a presença dela e da enfermeira, né, da Thelma Ribeiro. Então é isso aí. Na semana que vem, uma outra oportunidade de ver, né, a Grace Kelly no Esquema para Matar. Né? E eu acho, né, espero que tenha sido uma... Porque esse é um filme jamais conhecido, quer dizer, não sei... Todos vocês já têm visto esse filme?
Eu já.
Né? Oi? Eu não. Não? Então... mas eu acho que é um... Né, eu acho que, espero ter sido uma experiência prazerosa para todos.
Eu não lembro da programação.
Oi?
Eu não lembro da programação. O corpo que cai já passou?
Não,
vai passar.
Vai passar ainda. Tem no site, né, a programação. O próximo que nós vamos ver diz... eu estou seguindo a ordem cronológica.
Ela me deu a programação.
Tá. Nós estamos seguindo a ordem cronológica. Então o corpo que cai está...
É logo em seguida, daqui a pouco.
Não está muito longe. Acho que tem o Disque M para Matar, tem o Trouble with Harry, né, o terceiro tiro. Talvez depois seja o corpo que cai. Não, o corpo que cai é maravilhoso. O corpo que cai eu acho...
Até sábado que vem, então.
Até.
Tchau. Obrigado. Tchau.